When Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes hit cinemas in 2001, it made a lot of money, but it failed to set the public imagination alight. If we look at Planet of the Apes as a franchise, on one end we've got the original Planet of the Apes films, which have that cult classic appeal, and on the other end we've got the newer Apes films, which are generally considered to be really good. Tim Burton's film sort of sits in this awkward middle ground. It's too nerdy to sit with the cool kids, but it's too edgy to sit with the nerdy kids. I feel that, Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. The main criticisms of the film at the time included a nonsensical story, a confusing ending, and a general cacophonous shout of, "It's not as good as the original." These people were just not getting the vibe, eh? Despite a tremendous, record-breaking opening weekend, Planet of the Apes did not bag a sequel. And in the 20 plus years since its release, it doesn't seem to have had that much of a modern reappraisal. And in fact, it is still considered one of the low points of Tim Burton's career.
Take your stinking hands off me, you damn dirty human!
You can partly point to the film's long and troubled production, which led to the slightly wonky outcome. But I think it's worth revisiting this film with that outrageous production schedule in mind and realise that a lot of Tim Burton's anachronistic, neo-gothy style made it through into this film. Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes is a lot riskier, a lot weirder, and also a lot sexier than a lot of people seemed to realise back then. The initial script delivered to Burton was called The Visitor, Episode 1 in the Chronicles of Aschlar. This sounds like some John Carter, Warlord of Mars, Saga of Kristar the Crystal Warrior shit, and I am on it. I'm gonna say it, but I think Star Wars has something to answer for here. I know that I have a lot of bias and I pretty much see this everywhere, but 20th Century Fox reviving a 20-year-old series with an episode 1, launching a new kind of franchise, I just think there's some influence there. The 2000s was the decade of the franchise, and Fox had a hell of an opening hand here. Burton said that he loved that whole Chronicles of Aschlar thing. As a fan of the original Planet of the Apes, there was a lot at stake for him here, personally. He wasn't going to improve on that original film. You can't do that twist twice. But this Chronicles of Aschlar thing meant that he didn't even have to try. If he was going to make his own Apes film, he could do it on his own terms. He could go places nobody would expect. He wasn't going to remake, he was going to reimagine. It needs to be said that this is Tim Burton at the peak of his powers. Sleepy Hollow had come out in 1999 to box office success and some of the best reviews of his entire career. Sleepy Hollow rips as well, if you've not seen it. Immediately before Planet of the Apes, he did these Timex adverts, which are just the most condensed Tim Burton things imaginable. And what I'm saying is, Fox here is getting a visionary director in his prime. Fox had a really big black hole in their summer 2001 schedule. So they decided Planet of the Apes would be their big summer 2001 tentpole. Shooting would start in November 2000 with a release the following May. For the people among you who aren't mathematicians, that's 6 months to write, pre-produce, shoot, post-produce, edit, and deliver a $100 million science fiction film. Fox wanted their version of Lord of the Rings, but they wanted it turned around like it was a Roger Corman joint. Burton is very clearly a good project manager because he saw that deadline and he saw this script he'd been given, filled with centaurs, monsters, spaceships, multiple Ben-Hur style epic battles, and he scoped this as nearer to a $200 million production. He knew that if he was going to deliver this in 6 months, a lot would need to be dropped from the MVP. And let's be honest here, this is kind of a hospital pass from the offset. I'm not going to describe what happens in this film with any real degree of detail. You shouldn't really rely on me for that. You should go and watch it because it's really good. But really what ripens my banana is everything which happened on the run-up to this hitting the big screen. The story of how it came about and the immaculate vibes. So that's what you're going to get. The opening of this film has some really beautiful, clean 2001 Space Odyssey style shots. We get this great sci-fi text on screen, and we're introduced to Mark Wahlberg playing the protagonist, Captain Leo Davidson. I like how he's in this little spacesuit amid all this really clean, white, Star Trek level of polish. An architect named Santiago Calatrava was the inspiration for all these organic, ordered designs of the space station and the pods and the modules. Nice little bit of Euro-style bold there on the clock, classic science fiction typeface. Before long, this is all ripped away, and Davidson falls from the clean, safe curves of his spaceship into a muddy, messy, and ultimately dangerous foreign planet. His clean, pristine white uniform is quickly reduced to torn brown rags. His technological advantages have all been removed. He's gone from high human order down into feral chaos. He now fits in with these surroundings, and of course his focus is to get out of all this mess and get back to that whitewashed safety. The second the apes turn up with their Egyptian-style helmets and their sort of Roman-style costumes, firstly, it's absolutely terrifying, but secondly, it's completely sick. They set about rounding up the humans just like they do in the original film, and then when our characters arrive at Ape City, we can really see the full force of the production in this film. Production designer Kik Heinrichs had returned from Sleepy Hollow, and he spoke about the budgetary restraints placed on them by Fox, but also about how Tim's films are all so unique that the challenge is never to make something realistic, it is just to make something believable. And Ape City typifies this for me. These huge, incredible, gothic-y, Aztec-y sets were all built on sound stages in Culver City, LA. Things that I love about these sets are the giant 30-foot monkey statues, or the way that it's made to look like all of these homes and shops and things have been carved into this big kind of volcanic rock. This is the best set work in a Burton film since Batman. And for wider shots where a set wouldn't be practical, Industrial Light and Magic built these absolutely wicked miniatures. These super wide shots with the Ape City bigature composited into the background, they're just immaculate. And this is one of those films where I'll be watching it and I'll find myself every now and again kind of going, wait, someone made that. And that is something that I don't get to feel that often when I watch a film. And I just think that's very special. This first act also introduces us to Ape Society. It introduces us to all the major players and all of the themes the film will explore. Things like slavery and societal hierarchy. The dinner scene gives us a really good insight into the military junta, which apparently runs Ape Society, but it also shows us that there are pure ape elitists who are concerned only with ape pursuits, but also there are some apes who are more sympathetic to the plight of the human caste, which in a way perhaps makes these apes more human than others. Where the original Planet of the Apes is a cutting reflection of the civil rights issues present in America at the time, Broyles and Burton's film instead reflects the fractured society of the late 90s and early 2000s. It says that we're all civilized now, it's just that some apes are more civilized than others. The general vibe is that a new contemporary moral code is emerging, and it's trying to pull the older members of society into this new way of thinking. But any social progress is held back by religious fundamentalism tied into this military complex which just seeks to lock down the status quo. Beyond Davidson getting home, none of the main cast have any real goals. Paul Giamatti's slave trader Limbo and Tim Roth's General Thade both benefit from that status quo. So their only goal is to perpetuate the power imbalance that they and their social elite mates benefit from. Helena Bonham Carter plays human rights activist Ari, and her character seeks to dismantle the Apes' system of oppression. But none of these social elites take her seriously because she won't change the world. Even her own father doesn't take her cause seriously. Well, this all changes when Marky Mark turns up because he does have the potential to change things. There's something really interesting going on here, and we don't really spend enough time in it to think about what this means. Because instead the film kind of focuses on a few fun chases and some battle sequences, and then ultimately Davidson getting home. Despite what you've heard, Marky Mark is actually great in this. He is us. He is that character who's going, what the f*** is going on here? And honestly, name one actor from this time period who better personifies what the f*** is going on here. I mean, there's even a meme about how good he is at delivering this exact feeling. It is kind of funny because you can actually read that his character is barely reacting to any of this stuff. He's shown all this like reality-bending, mind-blowing wonder, and he almost doesn't look like he even gives a shit. But I read it as a man who is just laser-focused on getting home, and so he's kind of barely taking anything else in. The film does feel like it rushes from here to its end sequence, and there are apparently a lot of battle scenes that had to be dropped from the script, so it's probably why the third act feels so quick. Fox continued to harrow Burton all throughout the production, snipping away little bits of the budget, which meant that new drafts of the script would often be appearing every day. The complexity of the production, the immovable release date, and the constant assault on the budget meant that Burton was often shooting several scenes at once across multiple units, often editing in real time on set. But the real joy for me still lies in the practicals. There's a massive battle at the end of the film with hundreds of extras all dressed up as apes wearing armour, and there's a massive monkey explosion. This is true guerrilla warfare. It's an incredibly chaotic finale, but it's entirely readable. This is a director absolutely in control of all of his filmmaking, despite the conditions that he's been put in. One of the most contentious things about this film when it came out was the ending. And I actually love this ending. Monkey Jesus descending from the heavens, absolutely fantastic. In terms of like a satisfying moral victory, there kind of isn't one. The status quo is essentially circumvented, and we're basically just left to hope that things get better from this point on. But the actual ending is utterly vibes central. I don't want to spoil this. You really need to watch it. But essentially, Leo gets back to his right time, but things aren't as they seem. There is a hook here for a potential sequel, and that was the idea. And the film actually got a lot of criticism for this because it's a bit too open-ended and it doesn't really explain itself. And I'm like, why are you people insisting on everything making sense? Stop being the kind of person who watches a film about monkeys in space and then insists that things make sense. Walk away from this burning desire to have everything presented to you in a nice, neat beige slop. Get on my level. Embrace these vibes and appreciate art for what it is. I guarantee you will enjoy it all the more. At a time when CGI was poised to take over every aspect of the filmmaking process, Planet of the Apes feels like a last hurrah for a very physical production. From sets to miniatures to prosthetics to costumes, CGI is present here, but it's absolutely minimal. At this point in time, CGI was still really expensive, so it had to be used very sparingly, and it's to the benefit of this film. I am also a massive fan of practical effects, and this film is honestly one of the genuine highlights of this decade. Although CGI performance capture had been suggested, Burton's focus was good actors and good practicals, something he knew he could rely on. It was producers Winter and Zanuck who turned to practical effects guru Rick Baker. Burton had previously worked with Baker on Ed Wood and Batman Forever, but Baker's expertise in monster makeup goes without saying. And when it comes to monkey makeup, you'd be hard pushed to find someone more qualified. Due to the budget and the incredible turnaround time on Apes, Rick Baker's team was signed up before any of the actors had been cast. The 18 weeks which Baker's team needed to make the full body prosthetics had to be cut in half. And once shooting was up to speed, Baker's team was slapping on 90 monkey makeovers every day. Apparently the monkey makeup was absolutely hellish. It's a 4-hour application with actors getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning so that they could be on set for 7. Burton's wife Lisa Marie got a cameo in the film, and she said wearing this felt like being drowned. Everyone's mouths were so full of fake teeth that nearly all of the audio had to be ADR'd back in afterwards. And yet, under all of that, the performances just pour out of that makeup. Part of the reason for this was all of the actors were drilled in what they called ape school. The actors were asked to spend time with real apes, observing their behaviours, mimicking their little sort of tics, but also they received performance coaching from a former member of the Cirque du Soleil. This was partly to add more theatrical performance, but also to generate more convincing, lolloping, ape-like movements. They weren't just adapting the gait of the way a monkey walks, but also these very fluid, heavy movements. Everything is considered. All the movement has this sort of weight and gravity. And this is certainly a consideration that the original film just didn't have. Burton said that when we cover up, we can let something else weird leak through. And so underneath all this makeup, all these masks, he needed his actors to be able to shine through. And he got some incredible performances from everybody involved. This is a testament not just to these actors, but also to the direction they were given to help deliver fantastic performances. As is so often the case, the villain is more compelling than the hero, and Tim Roth's General Thade is no exception to this and is just outstanding. Thade is a military general who serves on a ruling council. He is a cruel, sadistic chimpanzee who will happily kill humans and even other apes in order to maintain his spot at the top of the banana tree. In the original script, Thade was going to be a gorilla, like all the other members of the warrior cast, but Burton was more spooked out by chimpanzees. He said chimpanzees unnerved him because they actually murder. They are actually really frightening creatures. And so we get this really great juxtaposition of this diminutive but sharply intelligent military leader, one obsessed with domination and control. He's a little bit Napoleon, he's a little bit Emperor Nero. I love the fact that his ear hair is curled up like little horns. I think that's such a really great little attention to detail. I love the Roman style armour that he wears. I love the fact that it has those apes fighting on the cuirass. Roth was actually offered the role of Snape in Harry Potter, and he turned it down because he liked the idea of doing Planet of the Apes more. Initially, he was actually planning on flying back and forth between England and LA so that he could film both these films at the same time. But it basically became too much work. He needed to choose one, so he turned down Snape because he said the idea of being an ape with Tim was just too good. I can't say that I think Tim Roth would have played Snape better than Alan Rickman, but also I think he made the right choice. Rickman is absolutely iconic as Snape, but honestly, Roth just eats this Thade role. I don't think anyone could have done it the way he does.
This one looked at me.
And apparently he absolutely hated Charlton Heston. This isn't really surprising given Roth's lefty, greeny leanings and Heston's at that time quite recent development into a conservative culture warrior and all-round gun nut. So that one scene they share where Heston plays Thade's father is just boiling over with that animosity. The tension between a father and son, a prince and a king, that kind of scene has been done before a million times, but there is a palpable tension in this scene and it works so goddamn well. And the big final reveal that man's great power is actually a gun, it just dovetails so neatly with Heston's now famous speech at the 2000 NRA convention.
From my cold, dead hands.
Burton said that this was a really weird, kind of perverse happening of circumstance, but it was also a really amazing day of filming, and I completely believe him. I cannot make this video without talking about Paul Giamatti's sleazy slave trader Limbo. In my opinion, Limbo is the real star of the show. From the first second he appears brachiating down these stairs, he just steals every scene. Even drowning in these scabby ape prosthetics and these massive fake teeth, his acting is just so huge, it transcends all of it.
Get him out and get him clean! Chop chop!
He's this great little shit-heel villain, and once we follow him all the way through the film, we get a bit of catharsis in that final scene and we actually feel something through him. He kind of becomes the emotional center of the film. He kind of indicates the tide of the status quo turning. I've seen interviews on YouTube where people are like trying to get Giamatti to smack talk the Planet of the Apes film. They're like, oh, you must have hated being on this film because it was such a flop and whatever. And all he talks about is how much he loved it. You can tell he is having such a good time and his performance is just straight up 10 out of 10. Top 3 Paul Giamatti roles: Limbo the Orangutan, Harvey Pekar, and Amazing Scrawn Head from that unaired pilot. As we're talking about the production of the film, there's not going to be a better time for me to talk about the music. Now, obviously, the music is by Danny Elfman. He wasn't given very much time, but what he turned out, I think, is really great. He describes the score himself as muscular and percussive because that's how he saw the physicality of the apes. And yeah, the music rips. The opening title in particular, I think is really good. It's all very heavy on percussion. There's lots of big barrel timpanis, dum dum dum, but also lots of weird little clinky wood blocks like marimbas, that kind of stuff. In some parts it feels very Elfman-y. In other parts it feels quite atypical. But throughout, the whole thing is metal AF. There are some really great sequences, specifically in the war sequences where, the war drums get going. It's like banging on log drums, and there's, again, like tambourines and kind of handheld percussion all the way through. He's clearly having a lot of fun with the percussion here, and it really shines. Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes was released in the USA at the end of July 2001. It was number 1 at the box office on its opening weekend, bringing down $68.5 million. It had the best opening weekend of 2001, but it would only end up being beaten by Harry Potter. It had the best opening weekend for any 20th Century Fox film ever, which means it had a better opening weekend than The Phantom Menace. It keeps going. Planet of the Apes had the second highest opening weekend of all films ever up until that point in time. This also meant that it was the best opening weekend for any Tim Burton film ever. It took $360 million worldwide on a $100 million budget. And yet, somehow, there's this perception that Apes was a flop. But it wasn't. It was a superstar. In fact, to this day, Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes is the second best-selling Planet of the Apes film ever. Now, I don't know what the was up with 2001, but it was an outrageous year for opening weekends. It was a hell of a year for films, really. And I don't know, maybe that's it. Maybe Planet of the Apes just faded out due to all of those mega hits that came out the same year. Fox said that they would greenlight a sequel if the film was a success, which, I mean, I feel like they reneged on this, probably due to the critical reception being less than enthusiastic. When speaking about the film many years later, Burton would remark that the production environment meant that he would rather jump out of a window than go and make a sequel to Planet of the Apes. But Winter said that working with Burton was one of the best relationships he'd ever had on any film. Burton's professionalism, his ability to collaborate and to make decisions, is what brought this film in on time and to budget. And for a project of this complexity, with those time constraints, that's amazing. In an interview with Cinefantastique magazine, Tim Roth spoke about Burton's constant struggle with Fox, with money, with budgets, but he also spoke really highly of the process of making this film and of working with Burton. He said that his communication style, his willingness to collaborate with his actors, made it hard work. It was painful perhaps sometimes, but it was always good fun. This is a sentiment which Giamatti and Burton himself also shared in interviews. Apparently, everybody really enjoyed themselves making this film, and ultimately, isn't that the most important thing? At the end of the day, Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes was always destined to be a fucking disaster. You can't have a film in production for this long and expect for it to come out, I mean, good, really. It should have been absolute garbage, but Burton spent the right money. He got the right actors. He got the practicals right. I mean, it is a creature feature after all. He dressed them up and he let those actors cook. We should be frankly grateful that it even makes the most basic lick of sense, and if nothing else, this film isn't boring. You might be one of those people who says things like, yeah, it looks nice and all, but the story is dreadful. And my argument to that would be, well, Burton films really aren't about the story. Ultimately, this film is a person who ends up in a place that they're not from. They want to go back to where they're from, and so they go back to where they're from. It's classic fish out of water stuff. This is absolutely within Burton's wheelhouse. Burton's films are about theme. They're about tone. Ultimately, they're about aesthetics. And there's probably a contingent of us who wanted to go into this film and have the monkeys wearing stripy tights with big Robert Smith haircuts while Elfman banged on with his usual la 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 dum 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 boo 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 boo. I'm not saying I wouldn't have loved that, but what I'm saying is this still feels very much like a Tim Burton film. It stands alone, inimitable. It isn't part of the old Apes films. It isn't part of the new. It perfectly encapsulates Tim Burton as a risky, unruly filmmaker, and I love it. It is absolute Monkey Mayhem. I didn't really want to go too much into the history and the story of this. I really just wanted to talk about the film's vibes. But the story of how this film got made is just so interesting. And with all of that context surrounding it, do you not now feel a little bit more invested in this film? Like, nobody goes out of their way to make a bad film or a bad anything. A lot of people worked really hard on this film, and their efforts are, quite frankly, fantastic, especially under these circumstances. I really feel like Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes is an overlooked classic. Looking back, 2001 was a nightmare of a year to release a film in. Who knew that all of the biggest franchises in cinema were all going to come out the same year? But I like to imagine an alternative timeline where Planet of the Apes actually became Fox's flagship franchise. Imagine where the sequels to this could have gone. In Paul Giamatti's own words, apes smoking cigars, driving cars, wearing glasses. Incredible. Thank you so much for watching this all the way to the end. Have you seen Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes? If you haven't, are you going to go and watch it now based on this video? Please let me know in the comments below. And if you like talking about Y2K popular culture, then I do a lot of that over here. So hit subscribe, hang around, there's more stuff coming out all the time. If you want to support the channel and get your name here at the end of the video, then check out the links below. You can find out what I do, how you can support it, and how you can earn some cool perks in exchange. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this. Here's to Monkey Mayhem, and I'll see you all in the next video. All right, ta-da.